In April 2015, a massive earthquake hit Nepal, leaving more than 9,000 dead and displacing some 2.8 million people.
We were getting prepared for the worst case scenario.
6 years on, even as the country is rebuilding, the pandemic has struck a brutal blow.
It's been unprecedented. The amount of, impact that it has done has been really heart-wrenching.
We're nervous. Until 1 week ago, we had 50 COVID cases a day, and right now, suddenly it's 1,000.
As Nepal reels from back-to-back spikes from a deadly second wave, the process of reconstruction has stalled. How much longer will it take for the country to get back on its feet again? It came without warning, on a windy Saturday morning. A tremendous boom echoed through the air.
And I was in this mountain and I was looking at the north, and I remembered a movie scene from Apocalypse Now, where you look at the mountains where there is bombing. And it was almost like that. Houses were almost like somebody had bombed the house in the north.
The ground trembled, collapsing walls, shattering glass, and dispersing mounds of dust. Within minutes, houses caved in, crushing people under a mass wreckage.
Our estimate for that level of shaking was more than 100,000 people dead and another 200 to 300,000 people injured to the extent of requiring hospitalization, and 60% of the houses damaged beyond repair.
I was afraid that the road is gonna fall off. I thought I saw a crack in the road. And then I kept on driving. I saw a lot of damage on the way, including the news of a lot of fatality due to the earthquake.
With a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale, its epicenter was Gorkha, less than 50 miles northwest of capital city Kathmandu. The quake and its aftershocks caused widespread destruction, with official records reporting nearly 9,000 dead and 22,000 injured. It was the biggest earthquake that Nepal had experienced in 80 years, and the worst natural disaster to strike since the 1934 earthquake.
The ground is shaking.
It triggered an avalanche on Mount Everest, killing 22 people, making it the deadliest day on the mountain in history.
Oh!
त्यो पल त बिर्सिनै सक्दिनँ म हैन मेरो लाइफको फर्स्ट डिजास्टर वाला मेरो लाइफमा भएको घटना म कसरी बिर्सिन सक्छु होला
Sonia was only 10 when the quake hit Nepal. 6 years since the disaster, the memories of the day still resurface to haunt her.
एकैचोटि सेक हुन थाल्यो हैन घर अनि त्यतिखेर त मलाई केही आइडिया पनि थिएन यो के भइरहेको छ भनेर
Sonia's mother had gone to the market, leaving her 4-month-old brother in her custody. When the ground shook and people scrambled out of their homes, Sonia rushed to pick up her baby brother. Only it was a moment too late.
त्यसपछि एकैचोटि त्यो सबै घर नै भट्क्यो अनि भाइ कहाँ गयो म के भयो केही मैले भन्नै सकिनँ क्या पछि चाहिँ जस्ट मेरो टाउकोलाई चाहिँ माटोले सबै पुरिरहेको थियो धेरै कुरा यो के भएको होला कस्तो होला मम्मी खोइ बाबु खोइ यो कसरी यस्तो भयो कहिले
कस्तो अब एकदम छागाबाटै झरे जस्तै भयो नि नसोचे जस्तो ल अब के गर्ने घर भट्क्यो छोराछोरी पुर्या छ
Luckily, 2.5 hours later, Sonia was found and rescued. Still, there was no sign of her little brother. As darkness descended on the streets, Rasmila and the rescue team started to hear her baby's cries.
अनि बाबुको आवाज बाहिर निस्केपछि रोएछ बच्चा रोइरहेछ भनेपछि झन् छिट्टो निकालौँ जस्तो भयो कि अब निकाल्ने कसरी आवाज पो छ बच्चा कहाँ छ थाहा छैन अनि आवाज छ बच्चा छैन खोज्दा खोज्दा 12 बजेसम्म गर्नुभयो भेटाउनै भएन कहाँ छ अनि फेरि अब पानी पर्ने जस्तो भयो अनि फेरि अझ जान्छ भूकम्प ठुलै भनेपछि सब उहाँको खोज पनि अब भोलि निकालौँला नभए के गर्नु भनेर छोडेर जानुभयो मलाई त डराइदिनु भयो के
When the rescue team abandoned the search to resume only the next morning, Rasmila was worried sick if she would ever see her little baby again. A gruesome 22 hours later, the rescuers found her baby buried deep in the rubble. They pulled him out, miraculously alive, unharmed except for a small wound on his left thigh.
एकदम माटोले पुरेको आँखाभरि माटो कान मुख सबतिर माटो तै रुन सकिरहेको रहेछ शक्ति त गयो नै होला तै पनि रुन चाहिँ सकिरहेको रहेछ नानी अचार देखेन देखियो
आर्मीहरूले बचाएको किन चाहिँ म सानो हुँदाखेरि अलि आँखा यसो चिम्काइदेखेको
तिमीले देखेको थियो आर्मीहरूलाई
देखेको थियो
हावामा बाहिर खेल्न गयो नि
हातमा लगाइदिनुहोस् आडी माडी
मेरो
हात फुटे त
नख्याएर
यो त भूकम्पमा पुराको बाबु हो सोनी सवाल भन्छ
When the worst was over and the dust had cleared, Rasmila and her family were buried in loss, their home razed to the ground, and with no way to meet their basic needs, they were paralyzed with uncertainty. Both Rasmila and her husband are daily wage workers. With little money to rebuild their home, they are renting a place near their ravaged old house.
यो त्यो पेटी भयो यो यति अब आज भोलि भन्दै 6 वर्ष त बितिसक्यो अझ पनि केही हामीले केही बनाउन पनि सकेन कसरी बनाउन सकिँदैन अब अलिअलि ज्यामी मजदुरी गरेको पैसा त हुन्छ हामीसँग न पुर्खौली सम्पत्ति नै छ न अब बिजनेस नै छ अनि त्यही भएर अब यो पुर्खौँको बाजेको पालाकै सम्पत्ति यति त हो यतिमै यति त हामी छोड्ने नै छोड्दैनौँ भन्न त लाजै लाग्छ सुकुम्बासी जस्तै भयो के
With no help coming from the government, Rasmila has decided to take out a loan. Unable to provide collateral that bank loans require, she has decided to borrow money from her siblings.
केही पनि पाएको छैन अहिलेसम्म सरकारबाट यहाँ अब त्यही पुनर्निर्माणको मान्छेको अफिसबाट हेर्न पनि आउनुभयो अनि अस्ति एकचोटि त हाकिमले पनि मान्छे नै पठाउनु भएको रे के कस्तो भइरहेछ भनेर बुझ्नको लागि अब बुझ्न पठाएकै भइसक्यो 6-7 महिना खोइ चुप अनि बुझ्न पठाएकै 6-7 महिना भइसक्यो अहिलेसम्म खबर छैन मैले कति फोन गरेँ कति कहाँ मात्र गइनँ कि गए केही होला भने हामीलाई नि आश हुन्छ नि अब केही होला होस् न भएदेखि राम्रो भनेर अब उहाँहरूले दिने भन्दा पनि म आफू पनि मागी हिँडिरहेको छु केही होस् बनाओस् न भनेर केही भइरहेको छैन
Six years on, the nation is still rebuilding. Many international donors committed billions of dollars for Nepal immediately after the devastating earthquake. But the allocation of money to survivors was excruciatingly slow. Despite pledges of nearly $3 billion, there are claims that those needing assistance received no more than initial handouts, which were barely enough to even clear the debris. And many, like Rasmila, are still waiting for government support to construct their houses.
यत्रो वर्षसम्म पनि अब यो आइमे राडी आइमेले रोएर यसो गरेर राखिदिनु हुन्छ त धर्म हुन्छ त
Nepal ranks 11th in the world for vulnerability to earthquakes. The April 2015 earthquake and aftershocks affected more than 8 million people. The overall damage is estimated to be about $10 billion, nearly half its GDP then. The process of rebuilding homes and restoration of monuments have been handicapped, not just by a lack of finance. Experts say that the government's assistance has not been structured and the identification of beneficiaries inaccurate.
We did not make really good progress on the first year. And then the progress is pretty heterogeneous, in terms of where we have made progress. Our assistance to individual house owners was same, irrespective of their background, economic background or others. This is not a progressive assistance.
As people did not receive recovery support immediately, they were exposed to risks due to unsafe shelter, poor hygiene, and mental trauma. More than 900,000 homes were destroyed. A quarter of these belonged to female-headed households. Single women have been particularly affected and have received inadequate or no assistance.
I think commercial banks did not give low-interest loan to many of these beneficiaries, so they had to borrow from what we call cooperatives, and they have very high interest rates. During COVID, they struggled a lot. A lot of them said, they have missed out on payment of this mortgage. So the impact was heterogeneous because we could not pinpoint beneficiaries correctly.
More than 500,000 women and girls were displaced. Many among them, marginalized long before Nepal suffered a devastating earthquake, have borne a disproportionate burden in its aftermath.
कोरोना भन्ने रोग फैलियो रे देशमा भनेर सुन्नु भएको थिएन अहिले कि पोर
75-year-old widow IT Devi's house was destroyed by the earthquake. She has since been living in her daughter's house.
कहीँ गइनँ म अनि छोरीले ऋण खोजेर बनाएर राखेर गएको हो घर चाहिँ त्यो असार साउनको भेलमा माथिबाट पहिरो आयो आमाले भनेर आएछ अनि अब यो अस्पताल छोडेर कहाँ जाने भनेर अनि हत्ताहरू गरेर अनि घर बनाएर गएको छोरीले ऋण खोजेर बनाएको छ
IT claims that she hasn't received any compensation from the government, even after making several visits to the local ward office and registering complaints.
अहिले 6 वर्ष भएन भइसकेका अनि यत्रो वर्षसम्म पनि अब यो आइमे राणी आइमेले रोएर यसो गरेर राखिदिनु हुन्छ त धर्म हुन्छ त एकमुठी सास छौन्जेल त ओभानुन चाहियो न्यानुन चाहियो सबैले 12 भाइ छोरा हुनेले पाउने म एउटा एकाल महिलाले नपाउने कारण के हो
हुन्छ आमा कति बजे हो गाडी हजुरको काठमाडौँ जाने गाडी कति बजे
हजुर
काठमाडौँ जाने गाडी कति बजे टिकट काट्नु हो
9 बजे आउने भयो
Journalist Hariram has been covering stories from remote areas in Gorkha district, the epicenter of the 2015 earthquake, situated around 80 kilometers from Kathmandu. 6 years on, he still reports from these areas in the hope of getting grievances like IT Devis heard by the authorities. Hariram feels that the reconstruction work, though a mixed bag, has a few positives.
फेरि गोर्खामा भूकम्प गयो केही मान्छेहरूको मृत्यु भयो अनि त्यसपछि घरहरू लगभग 72,000 घरहरू भत्किए अहिलेसम्म 70,000 6 वर्षको बिचमा 72 मध्ये 60,000 घरहरू चाहिँ बनिसकेका छन् 60,000 घरहरूले चाहिँ तेस्रो किस्ता लैसकेका छन् अनि त्यसपछि हाम्रो यो भूकम्पले केही पनि भएको छ फेरि स्कुलहरू राम्रा बनेका छन् हेर्नु त्यो बेलाका ढुङ्गा माटोले बनेका त्यो बेलाको भन्दा अहिलेको स्कुलहरूको अवस्था चाहिँ अलिकति फेरिएको छ
The local government has tried to address some of people's genuine complaints. Yet, Hariram feels that a cash grant of around $3,000 given to most families hasn't been sufficient for them to rebuild their homes. They have even incurred debts to finish construction.
मेरो त्यो 3 लाखले चाहिँ त्यो ढुवानी भाडा नपुग्ने त्यो चाहिँ मलाई एउटा भौगोलिक स्थिति हेरेर चाहिँ त्यो अनुदान रकम दिएको भए अझै सहज हुन्थ्यो भूकम्प पीडितलाई जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई एउटा कुरो
It would have been better if the government assistance was structured in such a way that rich people get less than poor people. But irrespective of their economic background, all of them were entitled to get almost $3,000 per household in reconstruction, which was unfair to poor people. In that sense, government did not handle these assistances properly or ideally.
Out of this almost 800,000 houses, we have been able to complete this almost completion stage of the 93% is really a very good number. Whatever sort of this emergency operation that we did, I think mark it as a success.
The National Reconstruction Authority, or NRA, headed by Sushil Gyawali, was established nearly 8 months after the earthquake to rehabilitate quake victims. Experts claim that fewer than 500,000 houses have been rebuilt, along with less than half of the 900 damaged monuments and cultural sites. Some who were left without land ownership certificates after the quake have yet to receive loans from banks to start rebuilding houses. We asked Sushil Gyawali about these and sought a response to complaints made by quake-hit families.
Yeah, you are talking about the 6-7% of the people, yeah? I agree on that. You are not talking about the 93% of the people, yeah? If you see the positive story, there are the huge positive story are there. And then if you see around 6-7% only you will have to make the narrative of our reconstruction in Nepal, only looking into the 6-7%, you can make that. But there should be a balance of all sort of the narrative that you are creating.
Sushil Gyawali admits to resource gaps and challenges faced by the NRA. The post-quake reconstruction could not gain momentum due to institutional constraints and lack of adequate resources.
Certainly resource is a constraint for us. If the resources would have been available to the NRA, we would have been completing all sort of the reconstruction work even 1 year before. Point is, we need the huge resources, which has to be managed by the government, and certainly there is a certain level of the resource gap, and then we are managing that.
In addition to resource constraints, there were political infighting, bureaucracy, and lack of clear policies and procedures. To add to the misery, last year, the first wave of COVID-19 and the lockdowns that followed further impeded NRA's progress.
There is huge impact, certainly, yeah, because we have to stop the work. We have to tell to the people that you do not have to go to the work and then just stop all the construction or the reconstruction works. And then almost 6 months, more than 6 months were the lockdown.
The lockdown really had an impact. Goods and systems were not able to freely flow. People were not able to travel. The construction industry had to shut down almost entirely, and so things were delayed by at least another 6 months. So this is also one of the factors that perhaps by now the reconstruction work of those remaining few percentage of households would have been completed almost 6 months back. So COVID has had a major impact in terms of reconstruction as well.
Despite delays in national reconstruction efforts and COVID lockdowns, one community-based initiative is empowering people to build their own homes with technical support from non-governmental organizations.
गरेर अलि बस्ती चाहिँ बढ्दै गएको रहेछ मलाई खुसी लाग्यो म आउँदा पहिला आउँदाखेरि घरमा बस्ती थिएन
Nepal is one of the 20 most disaster-prone countries in the world, with a high level of exposure to multiple hazards. More people are killed by natural disasters here than in any country in the world. During the 2015 earthquake, however, Nepalese experts claim the number of casualties were much lower than expected.
We were fortunate on that very day. It happened on a Saturday afternoon when most of the family members were together, perhaps mostly outdoors. Schools were closed. So that's the most important thing. Had it happened on a school day during a school hour, it could have been a scary, even more scarier situation. Also fortunate in the sense that it happened on a daytime. Had it happened on a night, perhaps the casualties would have been much more higher.
Some of the estimation that the research have come up, it would have exceeded almost 25,000. It is really a huge number. So that's why the earthquake in 2015 has knocked our door of our country in regards to this disaster preparedness, yeah, and then given an opportunity for us to make ourselves resilient enough. So we have to now utilize this opportunity and then prepare ourselves to make our whole nation resilient for the future potential disaster.
20% of Nepal's nearly 30 million population live below the poverty line and lack the ability to cope with a major calamity. Nepal's infrastructure was critically feeble even before the disaster struck. With a per capita GDP of around $1,000 a year, many Nepalis build their own houses without oversight from trained engineers. The weak structures are what turned fatal, increasing the number of casualties.
what kills? Earthquake doesn't kill people. People are killed by the structure that they construct. And the way they construct or the materials they use, they construct, you have to change the mindset of the people so that they start demanding safety. Unless people demand safety, you cannot make them safe.
Dr. Amod Amani Dixit is a leading earthquake disaster management professional. In 1993, he established the National Society for Earthquake Technology, or NSET, with a vision to creating earthquake-safe communities in Nepal by mitigating risks and increasing seismic protection.
Our job is to provide knowledge about the limitation of any construction material, the best usage of the construction material, the improvement of the process, how you can improve the quality of the even mud.
This is before, this is now, this is during and after now. So before it was like this, it's damaged by the earthquake. This is one of the ruler setting of
The earthquake wants the building to be integrally one. It means that the buildings, the walls, the floors, they should be tied to each other. The major problem is that there is no integrity in the different parts of the building. The biggest problem is that in this, that we have lost the sense of, what is a building.
In Kagezwari Manahara town, an hour's drive from Kathmandu, NSET is rebuilding safer homes in collaboration with the local government and as per the norms stipulated by the National Reconstruction Authority. Amod's team provides technical assistance at the construction site and conducts orientation programs for house owners, masons, and several women's groups to enhance their skills to build earthquake-resilient houses.
We have imported the concept of concrete, but we have lost the entire sense of the, what makes the concrete strong. We are misusing the proportions. We are not curing the concrete, and then we are not looking at the details. Sand and concrete and water has to be mixed in proper proportion. Whereas timber means it needs to be joined. Similarly, with other construction materials also, these details we have forgotten and we are forgetting it, and that needs to be survived.
Nepal tried to institute a national building code in 1994 to provide both regulations and guidelines for the construction of buildings in all areas of Nepal and for improving the seismic performance of buildings.
Building code is the prescription for reducing the damage against earthquake. It helps you really, and that was the effort Nepal did much way ahead than the earthquake, and that includes training of your masons, training of your petty contractors, imparting them the knowledge how to lay the bricks, how to prepare the mortar to make it more resilient.
But enforcement of the building code has been a huge challenge. A team of 16 experts from the US, New Zealand, and Australia assessed over 3,000 buildings in the aftermath of the April 25th earthquake. Many buildings did not meet the code or were subsequently modified with interior renovations, making them non-compliant. What Nepal requires is not disaster prediction, but disaster preparedness.
It's really a difficult task to predict an earthquake. We don't need to predict the exact time and a date, but what we could do is we could clearly bring in that experiences based on our risk setting, and to communicate to communities around the country to say that this is a high risk, high earthquake risk setting. This is how we need to understand these risks and start planning, including our buildings and other infrastructures based on the risk.
You impart the knowledge, you give the capacity, you develop the policy, then you become resilient, the society becomes resilient. It is not a standalone only risk reduction. You cannot make a country strong or a community strong by only building a strong building.
Since 2015, several international and local charities and NGOs have worked tirelessly to help those affected rebuild their homes, infrastructure and livelihoods, and build them back better.
आखिरमा आएर जमिन हेर्दाखेरि साथै सदुपयोग जमिन थियो र हामीले प्रोजेक्ट बनाएर अक्सफार्ममा दियौँ र स्थानीय साथीहरू हुनुहुन्थ्यो उहाँहरू साथीहरूले पनि सक्दो सहयोग गर्नुभयो.
Social worker Dheeraj Maski's organization has tied up with Oxfam to initiate a community-headed initiative. It has empowered people to rebuild their homes with technical help from the NGO. The plan is to build a total of 138 houses with partial funding from Oxfam. The construction had been delayed due to shortage of funds, but now the community has taken over the responsibility of rebuilding their own homes.
अब यसलाई कन्टिन्यू लैजानलाई यहीँको स्थानीय साथीहरूको मोटिभेटबाट मोबिलाइजबाट हुने हो र अब अहिले चाहिँ समिति यसको धेरै सक्रियताको रूपमा अगाडि बढेको छ किनभने उहाँले जिम्मा नै उहाँहरूले लिनु भएको छ. र अलिकता चेतनशील रूपमा र सचेतक रूपका साथीहरू भएको हुनाले यो चाहिँ अब पूर्णतया कार्यक्रमको पूर्णतया हुनको लागि अब एक वर्षमा सम्पन्न हुन्छ कि भन्ने हामीलाई आशा छ.
While the project has allowed residents to build their homes and move to a safe place, there are a few challenges.
यहाँ चाहिँ सीमित जग्गा छ. सीमित जग्गाको यहाँ विभाजित गर्नुभएको छ यहाँको समितिले. त्यो जग्गाको भित्र रहेर बस्नुपर्छ. तर त्यो कुरा नभइकन हामीलाई त भैँसी बाँध्ने ठाउँ चाहिने, गाई बाँध्ने ठाउँ चाहिने, गोरेटो चाहिने, के चाहिने त्यो कुरा त भइ नै हाल्छ. तर यो अहिले जुन उपलब्धिको भएको छ त्यो कुरामा उहाँहरू बुझ्दै गएपछि सेटिस्फाई हुनुहुन्छ.
For 76-year-old Na Bahadur, moving to the new place has meant altering his lifestyle. And that hasn't been easy.
यहाँको घर खै कस्तो कोठा सानो छ. जे भयो नि थोरै परिवार हुनलाई सजिलो छ, धेरै परिवार हुनलाई गाह्रो छ. घर त अब ठिकै लाग्छ नि. घर त अब उही हामीलाई जान आउन गाह्रो हुने हो. हामी मेरो बच्चालाई लडेको घरमा छ. यो घर माथि बारतली एकपट्टि बारतली झिकेको 2 तले थियो. त्यहाँ यहाँ अब बच्चाला अब ठाउँमा चिरिया छ अनि त्यहाँबाट यहाँ बस्न हुँदैन, बस्ती चाहिँ माथि सार्ने भन्ने कुरो गरेर सारे हो.
Na Bahadur likes to go back to his old place, situated down the hill in a high-risk area. He prefers his decrepit home, battered by the earthquake, to the new one. It had adequate land for farming and for livestock grazing.
होइन त्यो त यस्तो नि. अब हामी बुढो त यहीँ बस्ने, खेती किसान गर्ने, बाख्रा चराउने. अब तपाईँको अब आउन ओह्रालो छ सजिलो हुन्छ, जान गाह्रो हुन्छ. भोलि माथि गइसके यस्तो हुँदा आवश्यक पऱ्यो भने त अब आउन नि पऱ्यो, जान्न नि पऱ्यो. अब साधन छैन भने त हिँडेर जानुपर्छ. त्यो कारणले हो क्या.
It's a grievance often heard from many quake survivors, especially the older ones. The relocation of villagers hinges on two factors: where they will be moved and how much land they will be provided. Villagers like Na Bahadur usually require a lot of land because they have to farm, build a house, and need enough land to graze their livestock.
लाल भयो मेरो आज जोगीकै चाल भयो लालु
उँधो भए आउन जाने खेती किसान गर्न सजिलो हुन्थ्यो किसान गर्दा हामी त 8 बजे खेतमै हुने हो बल्ले बाङ्गा चाहिँ अनि आयो घर आमाले पकाइदियो नपकाइदियो कोही पकाउन थाल्यो कोही भैँसी दुहुन थाल्यो त्यसो गर्ने हो अब माथि बसे त त्यो सम्भव हुँदैन अब खेती त गर्नै पर्छ खेती नगरे त अब खान पाउँदैन हेर्नुस्
कराउँदैन उसको मन नपरी
To heed the pleas of people like Na Bahadur, the NRA has decided to provide land to some 4,700 beneficiaries living in high-risk areas. It has also mobilized various partner organizations to rebuild houses belonging to vulnerable groups in Nepal. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has put a damper on this. As cases skyrocket in the country, the pandemic puts to risk not just the reconstruction process, but also people's lives.
It's been unprecedented. The amount of, again, impact that it has done into the overall economic and well-being of individual families and the nation has been really heart-wrenching.
Governments and policymakers can learn a lot from natural disasters. For Nepal, there are big lessons from the 2015 earthquake. A crucial one being the need to future-proof the state, anticipating challenges, mitigating risks, reducing future vulnerabilities, and building resilience.
Biggest lesson for me is that preparedness actually pays. What I see is that whatever area was done prior to earthquake, it has done wonderfully well for, how do we face it. Where we have not worked earlier in area, it has fared very badly.
The most important thing is we need institutions, we need human resources, and we need to have advanced financing systems in place to address such a disaster. We now have set up the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority. We've worked actually on prior financing, such as the catastrophic drawdown option, jointly with the Ministry of Finance, the Prime Minister's Office, and with support from the World Bank. We've started that instrument to make arrangements for financing, not wait until a disaster happens and to start processing for a financing mechanism.
Building solutions must comply with the earthquake-resistant design code. While qualified structural engineers are required in designing buildings, quality control should be taken seriously. Existing buildings also require seismic assessment.
National Building Code has been revisited. We have many more technologies available. The earthquake-resistant technology is available. And we are also having the retrofitting technology. And the technology has now been transferred to the people at the moment. Almost 100,000 of these masons have been trained. Now almost more than 6,000 engineers have been trained, and then all the people have that knowledge of the safety.
The 800,000 plus houses that were reconstructed is an example of, again, how we could head towards a resilient society. The phenomenal number of and the quality of the school buildings compared to what we had, including a lot of public infrastructures, particularly bridges, public office buildings, district headquarters have transformed in that sense. So in that way, the earthquake was also an opportunity to really bring in investments and undertake reconstruction that are resilient to future earthquake.
Unfortunately, the reconstruction efforts that were going painfully slow has now come to a grinding halt. The pandemic has struck a brutal blow on a nation trying to limp back to normalcy after a devastating earthquake. Nepal hasn't yet recovered from the impact of the first wave and the extended nationwide lockdowns last year.
It's been unprecedented. The amount of, again, impact that it has done into the overall economic and well-being of individual families and the nation has been really heart-wrenching. Hordes of people that had migrated for seasonal labor, including some annual labor, have come back. They've lost their jobs back home. We went through historically one of the longest blockade, a lockdown in that sense. The poorest have been hard hit. A lot of families have lost their members. We're right now heading into a second wave, and the government has just decided to shut down schools. It has a larger impact, not only into the livelihood, but also an overall health and the mental impact of the society.
At least, for first 3 or 4 months, tourism was almost decimated. Overall, in the economy, the impact of COVID has been on hospitality industry, transportation industries mainly. Also on agriculture, there was twin shocks. Supply chain was disturbed, and also the weather was not very conducive this year for the agricultural growth. The growth was negative 2% this year.
COVID-19 infections have risen at the rate of 1,200% in a matter of weeks, putting immense pressure on the country's fragile healthcare system. Nearly half the tests are coming back positive, according to government figures, even as it warned of an impending crisis with 2 out of 5 people testing positive. Over 50,000 Nepali pilgrims participated in the Indian festival Kumbh Mela that attracted millions of devout Hindus to the Himalayan town of Haridwar. This is believed to be a major contributor for the sudden spike. It could potentially be a super spreader event, not just for India, but also for Nepal.
The second wave just started, so it's too early to say, what is happening right now. It's just, we're nervous. Let's put it that way, So until 1 week ago, we had maybe 50 COVID cases a day, and right now suddenly it's 1,000.
A lockdown has been imposed, and since May 6th, all international flights have been banned. Nepal's vaccination campaign, which began in January, has faced uncertainty after only half of the ordered supplies from India were delivered. Only 1.3% of the population of nearly 30 million has received both doses. The next few weeks are critical for this small nation, battling one of its worst crises of all time.
It has impacted our other disaster response, such as the last year's floods and landslide disaster responses. We're also trying to come up with a preparedness and response plan based on last year's experience to make it even more effective, despite the fact that, again, COVID, the second strain of COVID is there. We need to be prepared for perhaps for other earthquake that could happen despite the pandemic. Floods and landslides are bound to happen. How do we effectively respond despite these COVID challenges is something that we're confronting with.
For Rasmila and survivors of the 2015 earthquake waiting to rebuild their homes, the current unfolding situation, the raging second wave of the pandemic, is chillingly familiar. It's like living the same nightmare 2 times in a row.
एकदम गरिबलाई झन् माथि नै आउन नसक्ने नै गरिब नै बनायो किनभने अब हामी दिनकै मजदुर गरी खानुपर्नेलाई अलिअलि भइराख्ने काम गरी खानु पर्नेलाई अलिअलि भइराखेको काम पनि काम ठप्पै बाहिरै निस्किन नभएपछि के गर्ने भोकै त बस्ने कुरै भएन बस्न सक्दैन त्यसरी लगभग काम भयो यो लकडाउनले नि मान्छेलाई धेरै मार्का पार्यो लकडाउन होस् जे जस्तै रोग आओस् न धनी अब हुने पैसा हुनेलाई त केही प्रब्लम नै हुँदैन हामी जस्तोलाई त धेरै मार्का पार्छ